Welcome to the brand new series that I've been teasing about and hyping up in my other videos for the past 2 weeks or so. So this series is dedicated into looking at the worst cards ever to be printed for every single booster pack in the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG. I'll be going in release order, which means that this video is going to be the top 10 worst Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon cards ever to be released. Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon was of course the very first booster pack to ever be released for the TCG, and back then Yu-Gi-Oh! Was actually a very basic card game, which means that when it came to looking at the top 10 worst cards, it was actually really difficult because I'll be honest and say that approximately 90 to 95% of the cards in this booster pack are actually downright terrible. So I essentially had to pick the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst. But the majority of the monsters here are actually useless vanilla cards with really terrible stats, so let's officially begin. So the card that takes the number 10 on this list is HINOTAMA's Soul. This is a basic vanilla card with only 600 attack points, possibly one of the worst stat lines in the Legend of Blue Eyes booster set. There are other cards that have very similar stats, such as Petite Angel, Petite Dragon, and Monster Egg, but those first of all have actually more defense, plus their stats can be a little bit more general, except maybe Petite Angel, but at least that one has better stats as well. HINOTAMA's Soul is a Pyro Fire. That's a type and attribute that even by today's standards is not entirely amazing. You can only imagine how great that was, right, back in 2002. Number 9 on this list actually is kind of a tie between a lot of cards. I mean a lot, but just for the sake of this video, I'm going to be putting one main one, being ELECTRO-WHIP. I really tried to see what types had the most abundance and which ones didn't, so there are actually some that are a lot better than others. For example, Legendary Sword, Dark Energy, and Dragon's Treasure are perhaps some of the best when we're looking at these equip cards. Regardless, they're all really horrible and trash cards as they only gave a measly 300 attack and defense bonus to their respective type. These cards got power crept incredibly fast following the next few booster packs, with cards such as Malevolent Nuzzler and Acts of Despair being released, which were a hell of a lot better. But overall, when it comes to these specific equip cards, there's some that are really bad, like ELECTRO-WHIP of course, but also Silver Bow and Arrow, Vile Germs, and Raised Body Heat, as there really weren't any good monsters of these types that really were effective in decks back then. Number 8 on this list goes to Mizaruzame. This is one of the worst tribute monsters in this set, and really one of the worst tribute monsters ever to be released, although there are a few more worse ones eventually. In this set, there's technically only one worse tribute monster in terms of stats, which we'll get to in just a little bit. But Mizaruzame, with its 1400 attack and 1600 defense, is actually outclassed by many other monsters that are level 4 or lower, which means even back then when it was first released, it was never played, because it was so bad. Being a water attribute and fish type also really doesn't do the card any favors, which is just another worst thing on top of that. Number 7 on this list goes to Goblin's Secret Remedy. So this is a normal spell card that says increase your life points by 600 points. Although fun fact, back when it was first released, its effect actually said that you get to choose a player and increase that player's life points by 600 points. I tried to research this, but it seems like it was just a translation issue at first, because why would they errata this card, right? It doesn't really make any sense. Regardless, it's a really bad card. It's a -1 to gain 600 life points. Number 6 on this list goes to another really useless and horrible vanilla monster, Basic Insect. Basic Insect is an insect type monster with 500 attack and 700 defense. As you can see, his stats are downright awful. Now technically there are a few monsters that actually have less attack than this card in this set, and they are Hard Armor and Skull Servant. The thing with these two is that Hard Armor first of all actually has 1200 defense, which, hey, you know, it actually is more defense than Basic Insect, and more overall stats. In addition, it's a warrior type, which means it actually has more support than Basic Insect. Skull Servant on the other hand is also a little bit different, because yes, it was pretty bad back in the day, but when you look at the whole picture, Skull Servant actually turned out to be, I'm not going to say an amazing archetype, but it became into an archetype and actually became a pretty powerful one at some point, so it actually does have some use, as opposed to no use like Basic Insect. When you take all this into account, it's safe to say that Basic Insect is by far one of the worst vanillas in the Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon set. The 5th worst card in this set is Flame Ghost. Flame Ghost is a dark level 3 zombie monster with 1000 attack and 800 defense, but it's a vanilla fusion monster. While these vanilla fusions do actually have a better stat line than really shitty vanilla monsters like Basic Insect for example, technically speaking they're actually worse, as they still have really pathetic stats for a fusion monster, plus it's requiring 3 essential cards in order to make it. In this case, you need a Skull Servant, a Dissolve Rock, and a Polymerization, because back then the only way to summon these monsters was through Polymerization. So you're using 3 cards to generate 1 card, which means you're going -2 to summon a monster with 1000 attack and 800 defense. Needless to say, it's really bad and really worse than even other really bad vanilla monsters, because even though those are bad, you can at least set them in defense mode right away so you're not going minus right away. These are actually worse. The 4th worst card in Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon goes to Sandstone. Sandstone is a level 5 monster with 1300 attack, definitely the worst attack for a level 5 monster here released in this set. On top of that, it's also a rock monster, which means there's pretty much no support even back then. Its defense is also, well, you know, not impressive, but at least it's a little bit higher than its attack at 1600, so I guess there's that. But when looking at the whole picture, and compared to other tribute monsters like for example Mizar Ruzame or Steel Ogre Grotto or Succubus Knight, at least those monsters, despite them also being really horrible, technically have better stats than this one. Which is why Sandstone takes the cake for the worst tribute monster in Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon. Number 3 belongs to Fusionist. It's an Earth level 3 beast monster with 900 attack and 700 defense. Fusionist is the worst fusion monster of Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon. With only 900 attack and 700 defense, it has a total of 1600 stats. So yes, that does actually make it worse than Flame Ghost. There's other cards that are almost as bad aside from Flame Ghost, such as Cherubin the Fire Knight or Dragonist the Wicked Knight. Their stats are pretty close to each other, but Fusionist has the worst stats. On another note, this card's defense actually ends up getting lower than the materials it needs. If you take a look at Petite Angel and Mystical Sheep 2, they both have higher defense than this card. Now they do have lower attack, although it's only 100 more than Mystical Sheep 2, which is really strange. Its defense is actually going down, 300 of a difference compared to Mystical Sheep, and 200 of a difference compared to Petite Angel. This card is just so bad that it needs to be this high on this list. The number 2 worst card in Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon goes to Red Medicine. Red Medicine is an even worse version than Goblin Secret Remedy. This card will only gain 500 life points for you, which is slightly less than Goblin Secret Remedy. So yes, this card is actually the worst life point healing card for this set. There are other cards that are just as bad as this one aside from Goblin Secret Remedy, but those cards gain you a few more life points. Cards such as Soul of the Pure with 800 or Dying Keto the Cure Master at 1000. Again, those are pretty trash cards, but at least they gain you a few more life points. Red Medicine is by far the worst. You're going -1 to gain 500 life points. That is never worth it. And lastly, the number 1 worst card in Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon, and I'm sure a lot of you saw this coming already, it's Raigeki. I'm just kidding. It's actually Sparks. So Sparks is a normal spell card that says inflict 200 damage to your opponent. It's a very basic effect, very simple to understand, but also one of the worst, if not the worst effect ever made. Now you could actually make an argument here because technically speaking, a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh players would say that any card that inflicts burn damage to your opponent is technically a little bit better than the card that gains you life points. When compared to Red Medicine, you could argue that Red Medicine is actually worse. And I do kind of see that, and it was really hard to rank these, but I put Sparks at number 1 for a couple reasons. For one, it's kind of the butt of all jokes. It almost kind of deserved to be on the number 1 spot because of that, right? But the second reason is because yes, even though inflicting damage is generally better, it's not the same amount. If Red Medicine said gain 200 life points, maybe I would have considered it to be on the number 1 spot instead of Sparks. There is actually a card that says that though, called Muyang Curry, and this one says you choose one player and that player gets 200 life points. So that card does exist and is actually worse than Sparks in some ways, if you think about it. But going back to burn damage, there are actually other cards that have really bad burn damage effects, such as Hinotama and Final Flame, both of which are actually released here on the same set. But those, as you can see, inflict a little bit more damage. There's also some slightly better cards, such as Ukazi with 800 damage, or Poison of the Old Man, which is a quick play spell card that can deal either 800 damage or you gain 1200, which means that one is also better than Dying Kettle the Cure Master. Regardless though, Sparks is easily one of the worst burn damage cards ever to be released, and for that reason it gains the #1 spot of the worst card to be released in The Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. It always, of course, helps if you do in fact leave a like and a comment, but also consider subscribing if you haven't done so already, because that will greatly help all parties involved. So if you want to mention something about this top 10 here, or if you want to recommend any other types of videos, as always, leave a comment, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye everyone, have a great and of course a fantastic day.